My name is Noah Houchins. I'm the computer science TA for the Learning Hub, and this is the Getting User Input workshop. So, writing a program that doesn't take user input might be useful, but it's also very limited in its utility. So, for example, I have this program here that calculates the LCM and GCD of two numbers, which is lowest common multiple and greatest common divisor, or greatest common denominator, same thing. So specifically, it's calculating those values for 54 and 36. So no matter how many times I run this program, I get that the LCM of 54 and 36 is 108 and the GCD is 18. And I can run this as many times as I want. And every single time I get these same exact values. I get the same answer. So if I want to get a different answer, the only way I can do that is by changing the code itself. So I could change this 54 to 74, for example. And now when I run it, I get different numbers for both of these. And again, maybe that is what you want to do, but in the long run, it's not exactly practical, especially if you're writing a program that someone else wants to use. Then they have to understand exactly what your code is doing or the part of your code that they need to change. So the easiest way to do this in Java, at least, is to use something called a scanner. So to create a scanner to read user input, we write the following. We create call the type of the object that we're creating. In this case, it is a scanner. Then we need to give it a name. And the most common name is just input because that's what it represents. And now we need to set this equal to a new scanner. So we're creating this scanner object. And in the parentheses, we're going to tell it what we want to read from. So in this case, it's system.in. Now, some of you might realize that system.in sounds a lot like system.out, and that's because those two are opposites. So system.out is when the program prints text to the user. System.in is when the user gives input to the program. So they're opposites of each other. Now we're getting an error because we need to import the scanner in order to use it. And there's two ways that you can do that. The first way is you can write out the import statement yourself. So you'll go up here. Here I have my package for the class, but you'll type import and then java.util.scanner. And now that fixes our problem. That error is now gone. What's nice about Eclipse is I don't have to type that at all. I can use the shortcut Control-Shift-O. And the O stands for organize imports. So it'll import anything that I need that I don't already have. And if I remove this line, we have an unused import. And if I hit Control-Shift-O, it will remove anything I'm not using. So that's another reason I really like Eclipse. Okay, now that we have our scanner, we can start to use it. So we need to make sure we create our scanner before we use it. So if I have the scanner created on line 8, or move it down to line 9, I can't reference it on line 8. It will work. You can see that input cannot be resolved to a type. So now after the scanner, we have the 4 most common function calls in the scanner class that we can use. And those are next line, so input.nextLine. We have input.next, input.nextInt, and .next double. These are the 4 main ones, but there are more such as next boolean, next long, so on and so on. And all of these will retrieve the next piece of input from the user, but they each do it a little bit different. There's something different about each of them. So next line and next will both give you a string type variable. Let's make it a little nicer. So these both return a string, which is any form of text. And we'll go over the difference between next line and next in just a little bit. Then we have next int, which returns, as you might guess, an int, and double returns a double. So depending on the type of input that we're expecting to get from the user, will change which one of these calls we should use. Input.nextInt and next double and some of the other ones, these will throw an error if the user inputs something that is not a number, or if they enter, if they were expecting an int and they enter a decimal point, it'll get an error. And it's the input mismatch exception. And I'll talk more about that and how to handle it in the exception handling workshop. We're not going to cover that here. Just know that you still can get errors when you're asking for input. So in order to use the scanner most effectively, we want to display a message to the user before we retrieve their input. For example, if you had to fill out like a form or a survey with a bunch of blank lines and nothing to tell you what to write in each line, it would be extremely difficult to fill out that form. So when I ask for input without displaying a message, the user might not even know that the program is waiting for them to enter an input. And I'll give an example of that. Let's say I want somebody's name, which would be a string. I can say string name equals input.next or next line, both will work here. And then we can do a printout that says your name is, and then their name, whatever they typed in. And that's before I keep going, this is the important part where we're retrieving the data, but we need to make sure we store it in a variable. Because if we don't store it, it'll just retrieve the input and then dump it. It'll just put it in the trash. So again, not very helpful. If I run this, the program is running. You can see this red square, which means it's doing something. But to me, that could mean that it's stuck in a loop or something else is going on that's taking a long time. So it's not evident that the program is waiting for me to type something in. As soon as I type in Noah and hit enter, now it realizes, okay, here there's the input. Now I can continue on. So we want to make sure that the user knows what they need to do. And we want our message to be clear and concise. Let them know that they need to enter something, as well as any restrictions on what they should enter. So only enter positive numbers or enter a whole number between 1 and 10, so on and so on. So here we can display a message. Please enter your name or your first name or however we want to do this. Now, when we run it, it's very obvious what this program is asking me to do. It wants me to enter my name. And then it says your name is Noah. So great. After we display the message right here, then we can display or then we can retrieve the input. And you want to make sure that the order is consistent. Same thing that you can't use a scanner before you declare it. We can't retrieve input before we display the message. So now let's expand this a little bit. We're going to make a quick program that prompts the user. Prompts is a keyword you'll hear a lot, and it means to ask the user to enter data. We're going to prompt them to enter their name, age, UIN, and major. So we can leave this part alone. We've already got that covered. And now we're going to go on to the second part. And I'll leave these all kind of separated to see what's going on. So we're going to say, enter your age. And this one, it's fairly obvious that you can't have an age that's negative or, oh, I'm 26.4. Like, hopefully this should be clear enough that they should enter a whole number, but you can also specify, please only enter a positive integer in this step if you would like to be more robust in that sense. But since age is an int, we can store that in an int variable. Then we can call input.next. And this extra space is bothering me. Let me get rid of that. Okay, now we have their age. So we need their UIN to print out a message. Enter your UIN and then retrieve that. And lastly, we have the major. Enter your major. And this one we're also going to use next line because we're dealing with a string. They can have anything as their major. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. All right. Now, if we run this, please enter your name. So I'll put in Noah, and I am currently 22. I'll just put in a bogus UIN. And now, if you notice, I can't type in my major. The program has stopped. And I'll make that a little bit more clear by doing some printouts at the end. So your name is my name. We'll do this 4 times. Age, UIN, and major. Okay, so now I was never given the chance to enter my major. I got my name, my age, my UIN, but then major is blank, and it just instantly moved on past that. So why is that? What happened? Well, I want to revisit the difference between next and next line now. So the reason it's called next line and the way that a scanner works, let's say this is all the console. Let's pretend that that's what this is. So this is where everything's getting printed out. This is where the user is typing input into the program. That's all in here. So if I print out the message, enter your first name, and then I'm calling my scanner to get that input from the user. The scanner you can think of as this line that's going from left to right, each line down, reading input from the user. So it starts out at the very beginning. I type in, I got caps lock. I type in my first name, and then I hit the enter key, which I will represent by putting enter in parentheses. Now I tell the scanner, okay, read the next line. So what that's going to do, the scanner is right here. It's going to read all the way until it sees that I hit the enter key. It's going to send everything from where it started to where it ended, but it's not going to include enter. So Noah is what gets returned into here, into this string. And then the scanner moves on to the next line because it saw, okay, this person pressed enter. Now I'm going to move on to the next line. Then it asks for my age. So I type in 22 and then I hit enter. And now the scanner is looking for an int because we called input.nextInt. So the scanner is right here. It reads 22, and then it sees that the next input is not a number. It's the enter key. So the scanner reads that 22 and it stops right here. And then 22 gets returned up to the age. Then the same thing happens with the UIN, right? I'm on the next line here, and I type in my UIN, which is this. And we tell the scanner, give me the next number. Oh, and I hit enter as well. Give me the next number, the next int. So the scanner goes, okay, here's the enter key. That's not an int. I'm going to move on and go down here. So now it's on the next line, and it's going to read this number and return that. And it stops again right before the enter key. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 gets returned as the UIN. Now we're saying enter your major. So one more time, we're telling the scanner, I want you to read until you find an enter key, because that's going to be the entire line. Well, our scanner is already at an enter key that it never read. So it returns instantly and never gives me the opportunity to type in my major. It just says, okay, I found the enter key. There was nothing in between. So what happens is I'm going to return the empty string, which is just 2 quotes back to back like that. That's the empty string. It's going to get returned into major. So now major, it thinks it read from the input because we said input.next line, but the user was never able to enter it. So the difference between next and next line is that next line will read until it finds that enter key. Next will read until it hits something else. So if it hits a space or the end key or a new line, in other words. So whenever we're going from something that's not the new line, so in this case, we have next int, which is not input.nextLine. Whenever we go from this to input.nextLine, we need to make sure that there's an extra one in here, because what that's going to do is move that scanner down to the next open line. So we have int UIN equals input.nextInt. That leaves the scanner right here. We still have this enter key that was pressed. So now we're just going to say, go to the next line, input.nextLine. And now we're not going to store that anywhere because it's just the empty string. There's nothing special about it. So the scanner is going to go, okay, there's the enter key. I'm going to move down to the next line. And now we print out the message, enter your major, and we give the user an opportunity to enter the major. So now I'd be able to type in computer science or business or whatever your major is. Okay, so now let's rerun this, comment all this out, and make sure that this is actually working. All right, enter your name, your age, UIN, and now the program is still running. See this red square? It's asking for me to enter my major. So I'll put computer science. And now it was properly read by the scanner. I didn't just get skipped over. That's the important thing I want you to take away from this. It's a problem that comes up all the time. Even I'll forget to do this as well. Whenever you have, and I know I said this before, I want to repeat it because it's important. Whenever you have a scanner call that's not input.nextLine, so .nextInt, .next, .nextDouble, next Boolean, anything like that. If you go from one of those to input.nextLine, you need to include an extra one in there because it's going to get stuck behind one of those, behind that enter press. So when you call next line, it's just going to give you nothing. There are some times where you don't need to do that if you kind of know what you're doing. So here's another thing about the scanner, about how it works. I'll delete this now. We don't need this anymore. If we know, okay, I'm asking for next line first, so we have to enter something and then hit enter regardless. But because we're calling next line, I can put as many spaces in there. So I could put my full name in here if I wanted to. And in fact, I'll do that on the next time. But next int will read until it finds a space and then it stops. What I can do when I run this, when it says, please enter your name, I can type in my full name, put a space in there, and it'll grab the whole thing because it's looking for the next line, the next time I hit enter. That's the important part. I hit enter. Now it wants me to enter my age. So if I press 22, but instead of hitting enter, I'm going to press space because the input.nextInt will look for spaces or end keys. That's what it uses as its delimiter, which means what am I separating these values on? So it's going to separate using the space or the enter key, whichever one it finds. In this case, I'm going to type a space, and I know, just because I wrote this program, I know it's going to ask for my UIN next. So I can type that right here. And now I've typed in my UIN and I can hit enter. And now it skipped the UIN part. It said enter your UIN and then instantly went on to ask me my major. And now I can put in computer science and it still retrieved it in the right spot. The age is here and the UIN is here because the scanner read this int after age equals next int. It read right here, saw there was a space, and it stopped after that space or before it, somewhere in here. Then we asked for another int. So it goes, okay, that's right here. And there's an enter key after it. So I'm going to stop here. So it still worked the same way if we had the enter key in between or we press space. So sometimes you can write programs and say like, okay, enter 10 numbers, and then they can enter, 5 numbers per line and write 2 lines, or they can put all 10 numbers on the same line, or they can hit enter in between each number individually, and the program will work the same exact way. It's just you have to be careful if you're dealing with the next int, next double, all that fun stuff, and you're also dealing with next lines. That's where you have to be careful. In this case, I can remove this input.nextLine here. So before we typed in our UIN, we hit enter and it skipped the enter your major. What if we include that after the UIN by saying computer science right here? Remember that after next int, the scanner is going to stop at the space bar right here. So the scanner's still here. I'm about to hit enter. This will be the first enter key on this line. So the scanner, once it calls input.nextLine, it's going to read the entire rest of this line and store that in the major. So it still skips the major, and it would have anyway, regardless of if we typed in that extra part at the end. But now it actually stored it into that variable like we wanted it to. But this is sort of getting into the more complex part of the scanner. I wouldn't expect anyone watching this to know exactly how it works and like the weird tips and tricks. So it's fine if this part's a little weird to you. It's not really best practice, especially if you're kind of typing it in like this. You wouldn't expect a user to know what's going on behind the scenes. So I still think the best thing you can do is just include that extra input.next line right at the end or before you're calling input.next line here, because we can't change this to next. If we change this to next now, the user will only be able to enter single word answers for their major. But like computer science, health science, anything with those two or more words, they won't be able to enter. So we do need this to be next line. So that's not an option, but this would be your best bet. It's just include that extra input.next line in there. You could even, as a force of habit, you could include input.next line after every single time you call something that's not next line, just to flush out your scanner. So in this case, I wouldn't be able to put my age and my UIN in the same line. It would make me enter each of them individually. So that's another option. You don't have to do it that way, but it is pretty good practice. And it's especially good for getting into the habit of making sure that you're including that input.next line wherever you need it. But I think that's just about everything I wanted to cover. So I want to open up the floor if there are any questions about anything that I just went over. Okay, I'm not super familiar with NetBeans, but hopefully I can answer your question. Is Eclipse better to use while in Zoom? I mean, I'm going to be biased towards Eclipse either way. I think it's a great program, a great IDE for writing Java programs. I have never actually used NetBeans, so I don't know how they compare. And as far as power issues, my computer is very big and powerful. I don't know how this is on like a laptop or something smaller, so I don't have a definitive answer on that. But I wouldn't say not to use Eclipse. Like at the very least, you should try it and see what happens. You might run into the same problem. It might just be that Zoom uses a lot of power and trying to initialize all of this IDE stuff in the background is too much. Or it could be that NetBeans is more taxing on your computer's resources. Again, I'm not really sure, but it would be good to look into. Any other questions? Are you all good? Okay, great. In that case, I'll wrap this up now. So thank you for attending. Thank you for watching. Those of you who are watching the recording, I hope to see you at the next one. And feel free to email me at any time for any questions. I can't guarantee I'll get back to you right away, but I will try to get back to you in a timely manner. And thank you again.